The National Assembly for Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon are questions to the First Minister. And question 1, Antoinette Sandbach.
Presiding Officer, will you make a statement, First Minister, on the due diligence process employed by Finance Wales when awarding loans to companies?
Well, Finance Wales is a subsidiary of the Welsh Government and operates at arm's length, so individual investment decisions are therefore a matter for Finance Wales.
Well, as you said, First Minister, they are a subsidiary of Welsh Government. And last week in the business statement, I raised the issue of a company called Ex-Wavia, which received money from Finance Wales in May to roll out broadband in North Wales, amongst other areas. It's gone into administration less than 6 months after the receipt of those sums, meaning that a £600,000 loan from Finance Wales has been written off and that money lost to the Welsh taxpayer permanently. So what safeguards are you proposing to put in place to make sure that this doesn't happen with other companies that may have been in receipt of loans in a similar way?
We would expect Finance Wales, of course, to look to recoup any monies that they have loaned to companies, but it is inevitable that not all businesses will succeed. It's impossible for Finance Wales to be 100% sure that every single business that it supports will be wholly successful. That's the nature of business. What they need to do, of course, as they have done, is put in place reasonable safeguards, in particular, of course, the proper pursuit of due diligence. On this one occasion, I'm aware that officials remained in regular contact with the company while a trade sale of the business was being pursued. And now, of course, Finance Wales need to determine whether any or part of the loan can be recouped.
Mike Hedges.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Is the role of Finance Wales to lend top-up to developments after bank loans rather than compete with bank lending? And is it inevitable that some loans will fail unless all they do is back certainties, which means very few small businesses and new businesses will get any money?
Well, if they only backed certainty, then they would not be serving their purpose. The idea of Finance Wales, of course, is not to compete with the banks, that much is true. It lends to businesses alongside banks in a complementary way or as a gap funder. On other occasions, it may invest in a business which has been turned down by a bank, but it is in the nature of the work that Finance Wales do that there will be occasions when businesses fail. All financial institutions run that risk. Nobody can be absolutely sure that every investment will receive a return, but what is important, of course, is that the due diligence procedure is in place and that the vast majority of businesses that are helped in this way do then go on to become a success.
Alan Fred Jones.
Thank you very much. Following on from Antoinette Sandbach's question, a constituent of mine has made a complaint about the same loan because, according to his evidence, it was known within that business that that particular company was in difficulties before that loan was given. Now, I can't make any comments on those details, but I do think that it would be appropriate that the government therefore should bring a report on that particular case, because we are not talking of small sums here. We're talking about significant sums of money, significant sums of public money. And in addition to that case, will you ensure that there is an annual report provided by Finance Wales which clearly states what their situation is over the previous year and explain exactly what their tactics have been and how successful they've been in the valuable work that they do?
Well, matters for finance, these are matters for Finance Wales, of course, but I will write to the member and also to the member on that side of the chamber with additional details about what can be done in the public realm, and when there is additional detail with this, I will be able to answer these questions.
Question 2, Ellen Jones.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's priorities for investing in trunk roads in West Wales?
We will be publishing our new National Transport Plan for consultation before the end of the year, which will set out our priorities for improving transport infrastructure in Wales.
First Minister, one of the main priorities for businesses and people in Ceredigion is to ensure better connections on the roads from Ceredigion to the M4. The condition of some of these roads belong more to the 20th century than the 21st century. And I'm thinking very specifically about the link between Cardigan and the town of Carmarthen, and partially from Lampeter and Llandysul to Carmarthen. Will you as a government ensure that you do have discussion with Carmarthenshire County Council and Ceredigion County Council to ensure a programme of capital works to improve the ropes and these important road links between Ceredigion and the M4?
Well, of course, we always consider in what ways we can improve the transport system, especially in Ceredigion, and we've done that, of course. A great deal of work has been done between Llandysul and Synod, especially in terms of the Posbach, to ensure that the road is straighter. Llandafi, of course, which is in Ceredigion, a great deal of work has been done there, and the bypass in Llandysul, which goes from one part of Carmarthenshire to Ceredigion. So there has been investment in Ceredigion over the past few years. We're always ready to consider in what ways it's possible to work with councils on a local basis to ensure improvements in future.
Paul Davis.
Prif Weinidog.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I'm very pleased that the Welsh Government has agreed at last to commit to considering the possibility of dualling the A40 in Pembrokeshire by commissioning a study which is to be completed, as I understand it, within 6 months. Now, under the circumstances, can you confirm that the government will consult widely with key stakeholders, such as the local authority, for example, during this process in order to ensure that the study is beneficial and takes everything into account?
Of course, we would expect to consult with everybody that has any kind of interest in this issue in the usual manner, and I'm sure that the member will welcome the fact that work is now underway to ensure that the road is improved in future.
We now move to questions to the party leaders, and first this afternoon, Leader of the Opposition, Andrew R.T. Davis.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, tomorrow is the 5th anniversary of you becoming First Minister here in Wales, and I think it's an opportune time to maybe reflect on some of the issues that obviously have cropped up in that 5 years. And most notably, health has dominated the 5 years, obviously, because it's the largest part of the Welsh Government's delivery. Regrettably, on waiting times in particular, the record is pretty appalling. The number of people waiting for a start on NHS treatments is up 131% since December 2009, from 187,000 people to 432,000 people in September of this year. And those waiting for diagnostic services has increased by over 1,000%, from 1,906 people in December 2009 to 22,000 in September of 2004. Are you pleased and proud of that record?
Well, 5 years have gone very quickly, that much I have to say. And of course, I do look with some envy at my predecessor, Rhodri Morgan. When he was First Minister, we were in an age of ever-expanding budgets. We are in an age of Tory cuts. Now, that is the issue, and we have to manage with them. He is right to question, of course, the issue of health, and we do recognise that there are areas of the Welsh NHS where there is great pressure. Of course, we did announce last week that 70 million would be set aside now to deal with those pressures, and the Health Minister will be making a statement very soon describing how that money will be allocated to those areas of greatest pressure. But I have to say that the challenges that he has outlined are true of the NHS across the whole of the UK. It's certainly not the case that somehow in England things are massively improving because there are no challenges there. There are challenges there as well. We, of course, will target resources to those areas of greatest pressure, and we intend to do so over the course of the next few weeks and months.
First Minister, I noticed you didn't spend any time explaining the real issue here, which is the explosion in those waiting times. Yes, of course, there are pressures across the United Kingdom in all health services, and I think that's across the world, in fairness. But the figures I just put before you, over 1,000% increase in diagnostic waits, surely is completely unacceptable. And we know why the bulk of those waits have built up is because of the devastating cuts that your government instigated at the start of this fourth Assembly. Now, we welcome the additional money, albeit it's very late in the day that you've come round to that thinking, and the budget this afternoon hopefully will allocate that money into the health service. But one thing you could do today, and your colleague in Westminster, Andy Burnham, has announced, is the adoption of a cancer treatments fund here in Wales. Now, I questioned you on this last week, and in fairness, you engaged in the discussion, but you said you were unaware of the additional monies that might be coming. We now know that there's £125 million in Barnet consequential, of which 70 million you are saying is going to be allocated to the NHS. Is Andy Burnham right and you wrong for not instigating a cancer treatment fund here in Wales?
Well, Andy Burnham doesn't have the responsibility for Wales. I do, as does Mark Drakeford. Now, He is, as I say, he is right to point out that there have been difficulties in parts of the NHS. Diagnostics is one area. That's why we look to allocate money to the area of greatest pressure, and diagnostics is one area where that's been done, and we expect to see those figures improve over the next, well, they are improving, over the next few months. But he should look carefully at what's being proposed by Andy Burnham. It is nothing like the current cancer drugs fund that exists in England, nothing like it. It is a scheme that goes beyond what already exists. My view is the same as it was last week. I would not want to see a situation where patients were treated inequitably. The problem is this, isn't it? If we say that cancer should be treated as a special case, what then of people who've had strokes, or heart disease, or multiple sclerosis, or rheumatoid arthritis? Should we then ring-fence all the available drugs for them? Because those are all conditions where new drugs come onto the market, where they are looked at by NICE. Why treat cancer differently to people with other conditions? But let's go through some of the figures for Wales. Spending in cancer care in Wales is at a record high. The latest figures show we spend £10 more per head on cancer treatment in Wales than in England. And also, can I say, we spend more per head in Wales on drugs that are available through the Cancer Drugs Fund in England. So we already spend more than England, even with the Cancer Drugs Fund. And so really what the Cancer Drugs Fund is doing is plugging a gap that's been created in the first place. We know that a greater proportion of cancer patients in Wales are treated within target times than is the case in England. We know that cancer treatment satisfaction levels in Wales are extremely high. We know that independent organisations, such as Cancer Research UK, such as the King's Fund, journals such as the British Journal of Cancer, have questioned the Cancer Drugs Fund and questioned its efficiency. It seems to be nothing more than a political fund, and not one that's designed truly to help the greatest number of patients.
First Minister, I had thought that the Labour Party was a one-nation Labour Party these days, and when you look at the writings of Owen Smith, the Shadow Secretary of State, obviously, he does believe in that one-nation philosophy. You clearly don't. When you look at what Andy Burnham is proposing in London today in his speech, obviously I do worry somewhat slightly because it replicates what we talked about only last week in First Minister's question time, which was a cancer treatments fund. Now, you've got the money, First Minister, from the Barnett consequentials. It's entirely your prerogative as a government to decide how you allocate that money. But will you not deliver an early Christmas present to the many thousands of patients, clinicians and cancer staff who could benefit from an allocated fund that would deal specifically with new cancer treatments here in Wales and actually put us on a par with the other parts of the United Kingdom that have best practice?
If we were on a par with England, then our waiting times would be longer. If we were on a par with England, we'd be in a situation where our LHBs would be going bankrupt. I mean, there's an irony to this. For example, only last month, the Health and Social Services Minister actually launched a linear accelerator in Welindre for stereotactic radiotherapy. In their press release, the party opposite demanded that should be done, not realising it's already been done, and it was done last month. And that will provide a huge amount of treatment for patients in Wales, and that is something that comes from a fund that was established after discussions with the Liberal Democrats. I see the leader of the Liberal Democrats nodding at that. In fairness, it was something that she suggested and we were able to support. So we already have that treatment in place. And, of course, we're going to invest in a brand-new cancer centre, a world-beating cancer centre in Welindre. That's an investment of over £200 million. Now, when it comes to cancer treatment, yes, he talks about the Cancer Drugs Fund, but we spend more on cancer drugs. Our waiting times are better. We're investing in terms of a new cancer centre. We're investing in terms of new machinery, such as machinery for stereotactic radiotherapy. And it shows that when it comes to those people who unfortunately are diagnosed with cancer, they have a much better chance of treatment and drugs in Wales.
We now move to the Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Presiding Officer, First Minister, I'm sure you'd agree with me that the confirmation in last week's autumn statement of the full devolution of business rates is very welcome indeed. Could you outline what policies we can expect you to implement to use these new powers to help boost the Welsh economy?
Well, as the Leader of the Liberal Democrats knows, this is something that the Economy, Science and Transport Minister has been looking at very intensely. The Business Rates Panel has already been set up to consider a strategic approach towards future business rates policy. That's chaired by Chris Sutton, who is, of course, the chair of the CBI in Wales. And we are now developing our policy in terms of leading up to April next year when we expect business rates to be devolved. We also have to consider, of course, what the financial implications will be. But certainly, much work has been done. Of course, Professor Brian Morgan's work before that in terms of putting in place a business rates policy that's right for Wales from April onwards.
I'm glad to hear, First Minister, that your government is developing policy in this area. 4 years ago, you introduced regulations that meant self-catering accommodation businesses have to demonstrate that they're occupied for 70 days a year or more to be eligible for business rate relief, a situation that is more onerous than across the border in England. Some years, businesses are unable to meet that threshold because of cancellations or other factors beyond their control. When are you going to use the current powers you have to help and offer rate relief to those small self-catering businesses that are the backbone of our tourism industry here in Wales?
Well, it's important, of course, that those businesses are able to demonstrate that they're operating as businesses to the level that we would expect in order to get the business rates relief. I've certainly not heard any of them complain to me that this is an onerous problem for them. Yes, it is perhaps something that they have to satisfy, but we have to do that in order to make sure that they can qualify for the rates relief.
I'm really surprised, Presiding Officer, that the First Minister says he's never heard anybody complain about this, because in fact your government commissioned a report last year into those regulations because of concerns, which reported in February. In May of this year, your government announced specific measures that would ensure that self-catering accommodation businesses were not unfairly affected. Now, 6 months later, we're still waiting for your government to act on that decision and implement those changes. When can these businesses expect your government to finally act to support them?
Well, we look at this, of course, as part of the work that we're doing in the lead up to April of next year. It's right to say these are powers that already exist. I concede that, of course, and I'm sure that this is something the Minister is considering following that report that was commissioned. And these are matters, of course, which I'm sure know that she will report back to the Assembly upon in due course.
Lead Reply Cymru, Liam Wood.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, your colleague, the Shadow Secretary of State for Wales, on Sunday said, and I quote, "On analysis of the numbers that were given to us in the autumn statement, Wales would maybe be around £1 billion worse off had we taken responsibility, had we been forced to take responsibility for income tax varying back in 2010. Do the Shadow Secretary of State for Wales's figures add up, First Minister?
Well, I would have thought it was obvious because, firstly, we know, and we've discussed this many times in this chamber, the issue of fair funding, but the income tax take would inevitably have dropped from 2008-2009 onwards. One of the issues we have to deal with as we look to gain fiscal powers is our ability to deal with volatility in the tax take. We know that would have been the case with stamp duty from 2008 onwards. We know it would have been the case with income tax. So it's correct to say that, as with any government anywhere, there would have been a drop in the income tax take. It's not just true of Wales, it's true of the UK and every Western European economy.
First Minister, it remains unclear whether you recognise that the £1 billion figure bandied about by the Shadow Secretary of State for Wales stands up, or whether or not you think that that's a made-up figure, a figure plucked from the air. Now, I wrote to you recently, providing detail on Plaid Cymru's calculations for underfunding. Perhaps, First Minister, you would be prepared to return the favour by providing us with the methodology behind Labour's claims that Wales would have been £1 billion worse off had it had responsibility for income tax sharing powers.
Well, I mean, we talk about made-up figures, and she refers once again to the 1.2 billion calculations which we haven't seen. I think, as I say, it's perfectly reasonable and perfectly obvious to suggest, as was the case with the government of the Republic of Ireland, with the government of the UK, France, Germany, Spain, Greece, any Western European country, that there was a drop in the tax take from 2008 onwards. We know that from the 9th of August 2009, when the financial situation across the world started to tank, that countries then saw their tax take drop. Now, we have to build into our calculations, as we look to gain more revenue-raising powers, that possibility in the future. So it is right to say, no doubt about this in my mind, that as with any other government anywhere in Western Europe and indeed North America, there would have been a loss in terms of the income tax take from 2008 onwards. It seems obvious.
There may well have been a loss, First Minister, but you haven't said whether or not that loss would be the £1 billion as calculated by your Shadow Secretary of State for Wales. And you also know that the calculations behind our figures are correct as well, because I wrote to you detailing those figures. Do you not read your correspondence, First Minister? Now, First Minister, you've said before, and I've listened very carefully, that you want Barnett addressed before income tax is devolved. And last week, you told me, and I quote, "It makes perfect sense to sort out the basis of funding first to get that right, rather than lock in that underfunding through taking income tax powers." And that's not the first time that you've made that point. Can we take it for granted then, First Minister, that a Labour Secretary of State after May would introduce a Barnett floor at the earliest opportunity, and will you give us that as a guarantee this afternoon?
Well, I mean, first of all, I have read her letter. It just didn't make any sense. I have responded to it.
Oh, come on.
I mean, secondly, could I say to her, well, I mean, I didn't heckle her when she was speaking. Secondly, I have to say, I remain of the view that we have to sort out funding before we take on board income tax. It is a trap. It's a trap that's been laid for us. It's a trap that has been laid for us. It has been made very clear by my party that underfunding will be addressed. We support the Barnett floor. There's no question about that. Well, first of all, I can guarantee it in the sense that she can guarantee, as she has already conceded, there will be a Labour majority government after May, having said that there will be a Labour Secretary of State. It seems to me absolutely sensible to deal with the issue of funding before taking on board major tax-bearing powers. And those powers are not something that she and I would necessarily disagree with, I have to say. But I'm not prepared to have income tax-varying powers foisted on the people of Wales with a financial settlement. And that has to be dealt with first. And we, as a party, will not let the people of Wales down in that regard.
We now move back to questions on the paper, and question 3 is Byron Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, will you make a statement on the Swansea Bay tidal lagoon, please?
Yes, I welcome the acknowledgement by the UK Government last week of the potential for a tidal lagoon in Swansea Bay, contained, of course, within the National Infrastructure Plan, and, of course, the intention to start closer discussions with the developer.
Thank you for your response there, First Minister, and I'm pleased that you welcome yet another significant Welsh infrastructure and commitment by the Conservative-led government. Especially given the tidal lagoon has huge potential for job creation and confirms just how important various forms of renewable energy remain for both Wales and the UK. Will you now commit, please, your government to playing its role in supporting and ensuring the delivery of the leisure side of the development? This is crucial if Swansea is to realise the benefits from this development, because Swansea needs your full support, given all the planning and support mechanisms for this aspect of the development are, of course, devolved here to Cardiff Bay.
Well, the lagoon isn't. We know that.
No.
But in terms of the other developments, of course we'd want to see the city have the maximising of benefits as a result of the lagoon, and we'll work as hard as we can in order for that to happen. We will do our bit. We'd like to see the UK government do its bit and ensure, of course, that energy consents are devolved in the same way as they are across the rest of the UK. I've said this before. The people of Wales deserve control over their resources in the same way as the people of England, Scotland and Northern Ireland do. So yes, we support the lagoon. We're glad to see that it's in what's described as the National Infrastructure Plan. But again, we come back to this point that the people of Wales should be taking these decisions in order to get the maximum benefit from them.
Bethan Jenkins.
Prif Weinidog,
First Minister, you mentioned the National Infrastructure Programme. On a BBC report, they said that because it was included within that plan, that it was possible that it would be brought forward before the Westminster elections next year. Is this your understanding of the situation? And if so, what specific negotiations have you had with ministers in Westminster in order to ensure that this can be pushed forward quickly?
Well, that's something for the Minister, but this was a statement made last week. Before then, there was a doubt in relation to what the opinion of the UK government was in relation to this development, but now we're ready to work with them, that the development does move forward. There is a role for the Welsh government in the planning area and with certain aspects of this, but if this does move forward, we want to ensure that the benefit is significant for the whole region, for the whole Swansea Bay area.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, if I can refine Byron's question, the issue around the lagoon, if it goes ahead, is the developers have said there's quite a lot of tourist potential there. The Welsh Government, of course, already sponsors a stand at the Liberty Stadium. Will you start talking to the developers about how we can take advantage of the opportunities offered to the lagoon in terms of attracting more tourists to the Swansea Bay region, especially given that they have indicated that further lagoons may appear around the Welsh coast, and this could actually be a model for other areas of Wales?
Yes, we will, because there are obvious benefits. First of all, about 5,500 jobs in the construction phase, and another 1,800 jobs plus full-time equivalents from 2015 onwards. So in terms of job creation, it's clearly an important driver, and we want to work, of course, with the UK Government and the local authority where that's appropriate in terms of planning to make sure that those jobs come to Wales.
Question 4, Mark Isherwood.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the provision of autism services in Wales?
Well, since 2008, the Autistic Spectrum Disorder Strategic Action Plan has provided over £12 million for the provision of autism services in Wales, and we're working with the stakeholder advisory group in terms of working towards developing future priorities for action, and that work will come to a head in the new year.
Thank you very much. At the recent cross-party autism group, members there voted unanimously in favour of calling for an Autism Act. Different branches and support groups stated, to give example, they don't benefit. There's little benefit on the lives. The difficulty is that it has no teeth. Autism services in the area is still very limited, and adult services basically non-existent, and people are being pushed into further crisis. And particular concern was raised, as you'll be aware, about the withdrawal of ring fencing by the Welsh Government from funding for the ASD Action Plan delivery as it goes to local authorities. Last week, your Health Minister confirmed positively that he'd written to each local authority telling them to continue to spend the money on autism, and that he'll be monitoring local authorities to ensure this happens. Will you ensure, working with the Health Minister, that a copy of that letter is shared with Assembly members, and that Assembly members are kept informed on progress?
Yes, of course, there's no difficulty with that. In terms of the autism, proposed, we call it an autism bill rather than act at this stage, this is an issue raised with me by a constituent on Friday, so it is something I know that the Minister responded to last week during his questions. I know that he said that he would be seeking advice as to the possible benefits of such a bill, and that is something that we will consider, of course, actively. But we know that such a bill wouldn't come forward now until after 2016, given the length of time left in this Assembly.
Simon Thomas.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, but there is additional learning needs bill which is already in the pipeline with government. Now, in implementing that bill, which will change the support that some pupils with autism receive in our schools, for example, are you going to provide additional funding to ensure that that bill succeeds?
Well, of course, this is part of the discussion around the bill itself, and we've said already that where there is legislation that places duties on local authorities, we would expect the funding, the changes to be funded. That's a principle that's been in place for years now. We all understand that where there is legislation coming into force, it's important to consider the financial situation and to ensure that that funding is in place to ensure that the bill and then the act is effective.
William Powell.
Diolch yn fawr, Llawydd. First Minister, with the concerns that are out there across Wales in terms of the dropping of the ring fencing of 40,000 per local authority, and given your Health Minister's undertaking to write to all local authorities, urging them to spend the money still within the autism field, would it not be a good idea to actually engage with your Minister to actually ask him to reconsider the removing of that ring fence, given the importance that that money has had since 2008 in underpinning the delivery of the ASD strategy, particularly as it comes for the refresh, which I understand will be launched shortly?
Well, officials will be monitoring the way in which spending on autism is taken forward at local authority level over the course of the coming year. Of course, if there are signs that the service is not keeping to the standard that we would expect, then we will have to take certain actions. But first things first, we will be monitoring the new arrangements in order to make sure that they are satisfactory.
Question 5, Alan Roberts.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister provide an update on the winter plans of local health boards?
Well, all local health boards have developed integrated plans with the Ambulance Trust and local authority partners for the winter to come. These plans have been published on the organisation's websites.
Thank you, First Minister. The Beti Cadwaladr plan, which has been published, does demonstrate that there is a need of expenditure of some 3.2 million in addition to their wider budget. Now, bearing in mind that on the 4th of November that the Health Board suggested that they are overspending by some 65 million, are you content that this additional funding is available within the local health board?
It's very important that every health board does prepare for the winter, remembering the financial settlements that they have. This is a normal part of the work of any health board, so we would expect them to be able to fund any pressures that would come through over the winter from the budget that they have at present.
Aaron Miller.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the reality is that some health boards simply cannot afford the levels of staffing that they require, particularly in emergency departments. You'll be aware of the fact that Ysbyty Glan-Clwyd in particular has been the worst performing of all hospitals in England and Wales in terms of its emergency department, as recorded in October. Will you confirm that the Welsh Government will step in to support those health boards which are under particular financial pressure, given the demographics and given the geographical challenges in certain parts of the country?
Well, we expect health boards to keep within the budgets they've been allocated. That's part of the normal management of resources that they would be expected to demonstrate. They have their winter plans in place. We know that last year those winter plans were effective. We expect the plans this year to be equally as effective.
Lindsay Whittle.
First Minister, it's not just the health boards who have responsibility to plan for the demands caused by the cold weather. I believe they should be working with local authorities, housing associations, voluntary organisations as well. But can you please ensure that not only the local authorities and those organisations I mentioned are involved, but perhaps more importantly, we could use the media and the social media to reach the vulnerable people who may be at risk at home, not even able to get to the hospitals should the weather turn really severe. They say Wales is a land of twitching curtains. In severe weather, the curtains should indeed twitch.
Yes. I mean, he's right. It's not for me to comment on what he said, of course. I don't want to curtain twitchers are a sizable chunk of the electorate. I'm sure that none of us would want to upset them. But the serious point is that we have, of course, historically been a nation of communities where people have looked out for one another. And I would encourage people to continue to do that, to support particularly the elderly and the vulnerable in their street, in their village, in their town. And secondly, of course, I would expect local health boards and local authorities to use social media as much as possible in order to get the message across. We know, of course, that that is now a normal and usual part of any communication strategy.
Question 6, David Ellis-Thomas.
Thank you very much, Dame Presiding Officer. May I ask the First Minister how many times he has visited European Union regions during the last year?
Well, the question is what's a region? I've been to London several times, and that's a region of the European Union, and I've been to several regions of the United Kingdom. But outside of the United Kingdom, I have visited Flanders, I've been there to Langemarck, in relation to the new Welsh Memorial in the Langemarck area, and I also went to Brussels in June to meet foreign ministers from the NATO countries.
Yeah. Well, according to my definition, First Minister, all of those are regions, and may I urge you for the future to ensure that there is a strong development of a direct relationship between his government and the regional governments throughout the European Union, particularly with the smaller member states also, so that Wales can be a stronger partner within the European Union, particularly over the next few years, and that the people of Wales will then learn that it's only within the European Union is there a healthy future for Wales.
Well, I agree entirely with that. We've played a key role over the years within the European Union and within a regional level. That's the definition. And I've met with governments in Brittany and Catalonia, and I'm continuing to have discussions with people across Europe of areas such as Flanders. And it's important that the Welsh voice is being heard within Europe, and that is happening through the office that we have in Brussels.
My Counsel.
First Minister, you know we hosted a conference outlining the success that Welsh Government has achieved on youth unemployment and also outlining how well received that is in other parts of Europe, looking at the Welsh model as a successful model to emulate in the future. Does the First Minister agree with me that Wales is now really beginning to find its feet within Europe, that its profile in Europe is developing and its reputation is developing? And does the First Minister also agree with me that we have to continue with that sort of work in order to ensure that Welsh Government has a high profile within Europe, within the regions of Europe, that we learn from Europe, and that we also showcase the successes that we're achieving within Wales?
Absolutely true. We can learn from each other. It was with some relief this morning when I saw the latest polling that suggests that if there were to be a vote, then people would vote to remain within the European Union. Not enough of a gap to be comfortable, but nevertheless that is given the Eurosceptic propaganda that we see so often. It's unsurprising that the negative voices against the EU should be so strong. But I'm very glad of the fact that we're able to play our full part within the European Union. Very glad, of course, as well to make sure that Wales's voice is heard in the way that I've described earlier.
Andrew Archie-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Obviously, travelling around Europe, First Minister, gives you the opportunity to look at other experiences in other countries. Your government has taken a conscious decision to have the highest rate of modulation on farm incomes here of 15%. It has also decided to cut the rural affairs budget by 18%. If we just go over the Irish Sea, the exact opposite prevails there. 0% modulation and an aspiration to double output in the field of agriculture. Which philosophy do you think is correct when you visit these countries? Your philosophy of cutting production and cutting support here in Wales, or the Irish philosophy of supporting growing the rural economy?
I think we'll have a more sustainable farming industry. Production has to be linked to the market. End of story. You can't just subsidise production. All that means is he will know this full well, that it encourages people to produce more than the market can absorb. It depresses prices, and it also doesn't help the quality producers, those people who really focus on what they produce. Instead, there will be some producers who are producing animals that are of a lower quality than they won't be there at all, actually, if you have production subsidies. What's important is there's sufficient money available to make sure that farming businesses become more sustainable. And that's why we've taken the decision to make sure that money is available through the Rural Development Plan, that money is available through modulation to help farmers look to the future. In other countries, they've decided to keep on with the old subsidies. That does not make farming viable for the future. And I think what we are doing in the medium to long term will certainly ensure that farming in Wales is on a much more sustainable and sounder footing than will be the case, unfortunately, in other countries.
Joyce Watson.
Diolch Llawed. First Minister, in the course of your visits across Europe, have you discussed various models of train franchises? We know that lots of train companies that run British franchises, including Arriva Trains Wales, are publicly owned, but by other European countries. 82% of UK voters and even 52% of Tory voters support a not-for-profit model. Yet the Tory transport spokesman says the idea is pure Marxism. Do you agree with me that it is no wonder, then, that the people of Wales will never again trust the Tories with their railways?
Well, it means that the Minister of Transport is also a Marxist, given the fact that, of course, some franchises in England are run, indeed, by the UK government. I thought it was a bit over the top. It's Christmas. Let's be generous. And Byron sometimes takes it in the neck from me. Slightly over the top in terms of the description that he gave. I think a not-for-profit company to look at running our railways is certainly something that we should be looking at. I think that would gain strong support from the people of Wales. And, of course, we know that transport is important, despite the fact, of course, that I don't think there's anybody in this chamber who has ever been late for an event and laid the blame on immigrants.
Question 7, William Graham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister outline how the Welsh Government will address the anticipated shortfall of 8,000 skilled workers within our manufacturing industries by 2017?
Yes, our skills implementation plan, which was published in July, does highlight the actions we're taking with employers in order to maximise the opportunities to grow the skills base. And, of course, particular attention is being given within the enterprise zones to them developing their skills plans that they need as well.
Thank you very much for your answer, First Minister. I was recently with the Anglesey Enterprise Zone, and though they welcomed the commitment to the £12 billion nuclear power station in outline granted by the Conservative-led government in Westminster, they were concerned that with your cuts in the education budget, they would not be able to meet the aspirations of those people who want jobs on that site and when it's completed.
Well, I mean, if you look at the apprenticeships that we have delivered since 2012, they are many. We expect, of course, the enterprise zones to, as I say, develop their skills plans and to work closely with the sector skills councils to understand what they require as well. We're supporting the regional skills partnerships to develop and publish an annual regional employment and skills plans as well. And, of course, in the early part of next year, we'll launch the Skills Gateway, which will simplify arrangements for accessing skills and employment support. We believe, just giving some examples there, that there will be plenty of support available in order to develop the skills that we need in the future.
Jeff Cuthbert.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, I'm proud of this Welsh Government's record on apprenticeships, which has seen all targets exceeded over the last 2 years, thanks in large part to the 40 million extra funding provided to boost numbers through the Young Recruits programme. This, of course, will result in more learners aged between 16 and 24 completing higher level apprenticeships, helping to provide our labour market with the skills needed for a high-tech manufacturing-based economy. First Minister, would you therefore agree with me that despite the cuts imposed upon us by the UK Government about the importance of partnership working between the Welsh Government, employers, learners, learning providers and FE colleges so that we can continue to deliver a successful apprenticeship programme during times of tightened public finances?
Yes, there are always challenges, of course, as the member knows, but we know that we have a long history in Wales of providers and employers working together to make sure that we have the flow of skills that we need. And we know how important that is. If we don't have the skills, we can't attract the investment and we can't help our SMEs to grow. So we fully understand how important it is to make sure that the skills flow remains in place.
Rina, you're with?
O'r agenda.
Now, from the apprenticeships agenda, which was pushed forward by Plaid Cymru and broken by Labour, we could turn back to Anglesey. Perhaps the First Minister is aware of comments made by Anglesey Council, which has expressed a number of concerns about many aspects of the Wilfa development, including the lack of pace by Horizon in producing a detailed map of what skills will be required when as part of that development. These are things I've been warning of over a long period of time now. What pressure can the government place on Horizon to ensure that that detailed map of skills needs is developed in a comprehensive manner and with haste in order to ensure that Wilfa, if it happens, actually benefits the people of Wales?
We will expect Horizon to do this regardless. It's something that would be important for them to ensure that the skills are available locally. I have to say that, speaking with colleague Menai, I went there 5 years ago almost to the day, and they were thinking about the skills that would be needed then. I know that the college has been working in detail to ensure that it can increase the skills base that would be needed in Wilfa, but it's up to Horizon to ensure that it provides additional detail to the local college so that that college can ensure that it does then ensure in turn that these skills are available for Horizon.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, I was delighted that funding for 5,000 apprenticeships places were protected by our budget agreement. But while there's been a lot of focus on young recruits and youth programmes, it is still the case that for the over 50s in Wales, you are more likely to die in the next year than get a new job in the next year if you are unfortunate enough to lose your work. How is the Welsh Government ensuring that older members of the workforce have access to the training and skills development that they need as well?
Well, of course, of the schemes that we have, there are some that are targeted at young people. Jobs Growth Wales clearly is one of them, but we've worked with DWP, we've worked in terms of with the city regions, we've worked with the enterprise zones to make sure that skills are available for those of all ages. We know that it's important that people are able to develop new skills as they get older in order to make themselves attractive in the employment market, and that is something, of course, we will continue to do.
Question 8, Anne Jones.
How will the Welsh Government monitor the impact of winter disruption on emergency service workers, please?
Well, we'll maintain close contact with the emergency services and with the local resilience forums to monitor the effects of winter on all aspects of public service delivery.
Thank you very much for that. And as we approach the Christmas time, I suppose it's incumbent on all of us to just spare a thought for those people who will work Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, either in the health service, the ambulance, the police, the fire service, but also the volunteers from the Mountain Rescue and from the RNLI, and people like that who may respond to a call out on Christmas Day as we're all sitting down, hopefully with families and having a rest. So what will you do, First Minister, to make sure that we do pay tribute to those people? Will you join me in paying tribute here and now to those people who will be keeping us safe over the Christmas period? And how will we monitor whether the strain of emergency service workers who may also then have to come down to the flu vaccinations, how can we provide for them to ensure that they keep us safe?
Well, I'm sure that all members would wish to join the member in paying tribute to those who will be working over the Christmas period. Never easy, of course, particularly for those with families. We know that without them, the health service, the fire service, mountain rescue, the ambulance service, and many of the services would not be able to function without their dedication. Of course, we always monitor the LHB's winter plans and the effect of winter upon those plans. And we would, of course, continue to monitor the effect on all emergency services and beyond in order to make sure that if there are any lessons that can be learned in any one winter, that they are applied in winters to come.
Angela Burns.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And Anne Jones makes an absolutely excellent point. But of course, winter pressures apply throughout the whole of the winter season. And I worry that in Carmarthen, West and South Pembrokeshire, we are approaching a perfect storm throughout this winter because we have an A&E Withybush where we no longer offer paediatric care 24 hours 7. Yep. We have an A&E Withybush that is already under immense pressure. Yep. So we're going to have more and more ambulances going from Withybush up to Glangwili. Glangwili itself will be under more pressure. The staff there will be under immense pressure, both in the ambulance service and at both respective hospitals. And I wondered what the Welsh Government is going to be able to do to mitigate that, given that we are having such a hard time making ambulance response times in Carmarthen, West and South Pembrokeshire. 84 minutes, one of my constituents had to wait for an ambulance not very long ago. And as we know, in the winter, more people get more ill more quickly, children have more accidents, and I think that, as I said earlier, this is a perfect storm brewing, and I would like your assurance, First Minister, that you're going to keep tabs on this because of pressure to staff, the pressure to the services, and of course the pressure it puts on the people who use this service.
Well, we know that people's fears over the Withybush A&E were allayed last week. The A&E will be there, of course, and will be there through the winter at the level that people would expect. And as with any hospital, we would expect people to go to the hospital that has the expertise to treat them in the same way that if somebody receives a head injury in Bridgend, they would end up in the UHW. If somebody has been affected by burns in Bristol, they end up in Morriston. So we would expect people to be taken to the right hospital for specialist treatment. That much is true. But of course, the A&E in Withybush, we would expect to be able to cope with winter pressures, as with Glangwili, as with Bronglais, and Howell Dda, of course, will have put plans in place in order to deal with that.
Lle Griffith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And when we talk about workers in the emergency services, many of us face frustration that paramedics are stuck in ambulances outside A&E departments. There have been reports about the situation in Wrexham Maelor Hospital just last week, but we all welcome the fact that Betty Cadwaladr to provide an additional 30 beds in the Maelor to deal with some of these seasonal pressures. But isn't that an admission, if truth be told, that it was a mistake to have lost so many beds in our community hospitals in that area over the last year?
Well, it's complicated what's happening in the A&E departments. The first thing is that it's almost impossible to know how many cases are going to come in. I've seen the local department in a hospital where it's been full on a Saturday night, and I've seen it empty on a Saturday night. It's difficult to predict how many people are going to be there, so it's difficult then to ensure that the services that people would expect are available. The second issue is that it remains true that people still go to A&E departments when they don't need to, and I've spoken with doctors locally who've said that to me, that there are other options available, and what's important is that local health boards can ensure that people can go through the department as soon as possible to ensure that the ambulances are available to go to other locations.
Thank you, First Minister. We now move to item 2, which is a business statement.